Many of us have heard that it's important to have a strong estate plan in place. But what's an estate? And what's an estate plan, and why is it important? Well, to answer these questions, it might be helpful to imagine the story of a man named Bob. Now, Bob has lived a long and very prosperous life, but quite sadly, he passes away. But as you might imagine, over the course of Bob's life, he's accumulated a fair amount of things. He's got a nice car, he's got a fine house, he's got shares in a company that he helped build, he's got a portfolio of investments, stocks, bonds, commodities. He's got savings that he's accumulated over the years, he's got a really nice art collection, and he's even got a fine watch collection and other jewelry. But since Bob is a widower when he dies, the question is, who gets all of this stuff? Well, as it turns out, while Bob was still alive, he nominated his good friend Harry to be the person to oversee this whole process of making sure everybody got the right stuff. Harry is what we call his executor. So what Harry does is he goes and he gathers together all of this stuff. And then imagine that Harry goes and finds a 200-foot tall box and proceeds to take all of these things and lift them into the box. Well, this box, this basic collection of Bob's lifelong treasure, is what we call Bob's estate. And if you were to add up everything in this estate, you'd find that it was valued at about a little over $25 million. So here's a question. Who gets the stuff in the box now? Well, it's a very complicated process, but to get the basic gist of what happens, it might be helpful to imagine a lineup of people calling dibs on the contents of Bob's box. But who's in the front of the line? Well, this spot belongs to the creditors. These are the people that Bob still owed money to when he was alive. So as it turns out, he owed a couple $1,000s on a car loan. So that creditor walks up to the box and after talking things over with Harry, proceeds to take a little bit off the top. So now the creditor is all accounted for. He's fine. And then this gentleman walks up to the box and it gets a little bit smaller now. As you might be able to tell, this is Uncle Sam. This is the federal government. And it's important to note that the federal government is only allowed to tax estates that are above a certain amount. But this amount changes from year to year with legislation. Some years it's as low as $600,000 historically, but some years it's been as high as over $5 million. So let's say it's $5 million. Well, this amount is his exemption. This is off limits from the federal government. Can't touch it. But the rest of the box is fair game. So Uncle Sam goes up to it and proceeds to tax this. Now, the estate tax ranges historically from anywhere from 35% to 55%. So let's say it's 35%. Then Uncle Sam would end up taking a 35% chunk of that taxable estate. And then, depending on what state Bob lived in when he died, the state government might also take a little bit. So suddenly, this huge chunk of the box goes away. Uncle Sam is satisfied now. And then this group walks up to the front of the line. These are the people that Bob ultimately wanted to give his assets to. In this case, it's his adult daughter and his grandchildren, but it could also be a charity or a family friend. But the point is that a box or an estate that was once well over $25 million is now just a fraction of that by the time these people come to it. So knowing this, why is estate planning important? Well, it's important for three key reasons. The first is it lets you reduce the size of the box while you're still living. So instead of Bob continuing to accumulate things so that box gets enormous, he can find ways to give his possessions away while he's still alive, so that way, when he does pass away, the government has a much smaller box to take from. The second reason estate planning is important is it lets you control who gets what. So instead of Bob's family members and friends going up to the box and arguing over who gets what, Bob has already articulated all of that in a will. Or perhaps he set up trusts, which we discuss in another video. And what trusts do is they give him the flexibility not only to determine who gets the stuff, but how they're going to get it and over what time period. The third thing is estate planning lets you choose your executor, your Harry. This is the person who oversees the whole process. And the reason this is important is because let's say you don't and you die without an executor, then the government is going to step in and nominate someone by default, which means you could have a family member who's not well suited to do this in charge of this whole process. So the basic point is estate planning helps you to leave the legacy that you want to leave and transfer the maximum amount of money into the pockets of those you ultimately want to receive it.